All right. We are, of course, reading about the Peace Pilgrim, and we stopped right here at the beginning of the purifications that she's going to teach us about. So she had her preparations last week with the four preparations, and today we're going to go into the purifications. And her her preparations and her purifications are really just for anybody who wants to do work in a sincere way, in an earnest way, in a bigger way in the world. And so you've got to purify the heart, you've got to purify the mind, right? So there's no selfishness in there. You've got to get a lot of clarity inside so that you don't present things incorrectly or make mistakes in the way things are presented. And just kind of setting the stage so that you can work from a pure platform, your inner shrine, dust off that altar and clean it up and clean the blinds and whatnot, and get yourself into a state of service readiness. And so the purifications, she starts. Then I discovered that there were some purifications required of me. The first one is such a simple thing. It is the purification of the body. This had to do with my physical living habits. I used to eat all kinds of standard foods. I shudder now to think of what I used to dump into this temple of the spirit. So you see that attitude that she's having, that this body, and we know from the Rig Veda, one of the oldest, well, the oldest scripture that the world still has available to them. And in there, it clearly outlines that your body is a temple. And everything that you put in that temple through all of your five senses is an offering on that shrine. So she's talking in this way, you know. She says, I did not take care of my bodily temple when I was very young. This only happened later in life. It was 5 years after I felt a complete willingness to give my life that I began to take care of my bodily temple. 5 years. Now I eat mostly fruits, nuts, vegetables, and whole grains, preferably organically grown, and perhaps a bit of milk and cheese. This is what I live on. This is what I walk on. Right? So she's clearing up the temple, which, and this is kind of funny that, not kind of funny, but a cool cross reference is that I've sort of decided or opened up to the idea that that's what my current posting is about, is just more of these preparations inside. There was a time when I had the caffeine habit. I would get up in the morning and have my cup of coffee first thing. One morning, when I had just taken my cup of coffee, I sat and looked at that coffee cup and I said, You're depending on that to get you perking in the morning. I'm not going to be a slave to caffeine. This is going to stop right here. And it did. I never touched it again. I missed it for a few days, but I'm stronger than a cup of coffee. All right. So just this, I like how she's just really looking at her life and seeing it as it comes, you know, that you don't have to sit and do a big wondering about your whole life as a big bubble that, and quite often we try to work on things like that. We're like, I'm going to make these changes, right? And then you start looking through everything and making changes. But the way to do it is like this: keep it local, keep it in the moment, right? As things are presented to you, look at them for what they are and decide, am I going to keep this or not? And that way it's a small thing and it's a local thing. And it doesn't throw your mind into turmoil. Oh my God, I'm never going to have coffee again. What am I going to do? You know, it's like we don't make the grand statements. We stay present and we discern in the moment. And that way we're changed little by little. And the ego doesn't put up its defenses, right? The mind doesn't get rebellious trying to save its space in there. I never touched it again. I missed it for a few days, but I'm stronger than that cup of coffee, right? So see how her strength was just about a cup of coffee, right? It wasn't a statement. It wasn't like I was greater than the 49 gallons of coffee I would have drank in this life, right? It just came down to a single cup of coffee. That's where her renunciation happened. And that's where that's where spiritual life happens. These little things in the present moment, making the decision, having the awareness and the presence to see things. and to be aware of them, that clarity, to catch them as they come. And so purification, this cleaning up our me and mine, is just a small and steady cleaning that so like what was it? Mahayogananda was telling me yesterday that a few years ago he started reading in the mornings when he first got up, because I was talking about starting to do that same thing here. And he said, yes, he says, gosh, just reading a few sentences every morning when you get up, he said, it's amazing how many books I've read. Just from that, just doing a couple of sentences when I get up and having my morning coffee or morning orange juice. I began to realize that I was disobeying my rule of life, which says, I will not ask anyone to do for me things that I would refuse to do for myself. Now, I wouldn't kill any creature. I wouldn't even kill a chicken or a fish, and therefore I stopped immediately eating all flesh. I have not eaten flesh for many years, not meat or fish or fowl. I have learned since that it is bad for your health, but at that time I just extended my love to include not only all my fellow human beings, but also my fellow creatures, and so I stopped hurting them, and I stopped eating them. I did not know at that time that flesh eating was bad for the spirit. I just knew it was something I could no longer do because it was contrary to one of my rules of life. Then I learned a little later from a doctor that flesh eating leaves poisonous residues in the body, which would also have made me a vegetarian. I believe in practicing prevention since the body is the temple of the spirit. Then I learned from a college professor who wrote a book on the subject that it takes many times the land to raise the creatures we eat as it would to raise fruits and vegetables or grains. Since I want the maximum number of God's children to be fed, that also would make me a vegetarian. The difficulty is we have not learned to stop killing each other yet. That's our present lesson, not to kill each other. To learn the lesson of sharing and the lesson of non-killing of man by man. The lesson of non-killing of creatures is a little bit into the future, though those of us who know better need to live up to our highest light, right? So this is that thing that she's going through and making her commitments, observing her life, deciding and making decisions about what she wants to be, what is proper for her, what's in alignment with her nature and what's not, and just having that courage to really to analyze so that our life is dynamic. Our relationship with the beloved is dynamic. It's not, it's not a constant humdrum. It's always a very present and dynamic interchange with God, with the divine. Our practice should be very alive. It should be buzzing with this kind of energy of, drawing close, getting as close as possible to our ideal and to our beloved. When I realized that white flour and white sugar were bad for your health, I stopped eating them. When I realized highly seasoned foods were bad, I quit them. And when I realized all processed foods contain substances that are bad for the body, I quit eating them. Even most water out of the tap is a chemical cocktail. I would suggest bottled or distilled water. Of course, now she's got microplastics, so it's going to be a glass bottle or a carton of water, right? But you see what she's doing. I'm not going into the details of it because I think all of us will arrive at our details. But I think the emphasis is the exercise that she's going through, this watching of her habits, watching of her actions, watching her thoughts, and comparing them to her ideal. What am I going to keep? What fits my ideal and what doesn't? And that should always be going on for us, And I like how she's just making the decision. A lot of us, like me, that's all I can really talk about. It's all I know. But I know for myself that I agree to work on things. I agree to struggle on things. But I'm quite uncomfortable about drawing lines for myself like that. I'm kind of afraid to do that, which I think is something that my mind is bringing up right now to look at. that I'm afraid of offending my mind and turning it into and provoking its rebellion, because I know what the ego is. And if you provoke the ego, if anybody, not even just yourself, anybody provokes that ego, boy, it comes back, double hard. It refuses to do anything. It's like a spoiled child. And so how she's just going through and very carefully and meticulously looking at the things in her life and whether they are going to be kept or not. And then letting them go very directly like this. She's talking in a very strong way, which is quite lovely and quite challenging, actually. I really like that. When I realized highly seasoned things were bad, I quit them. And then processed foods, I quit eating them. And then tap water. I know enough about food to nourish my body properly, and I have excellent health. I enjoy my food, but I eat to live. I do not live to eat, as some people do, and I know when to stop eating. I am not enslaved by food. All right, so this is the thing, not to be enslaved by anything outside of ourself, not to create a need for anything outside of ourself, right? Keep those things at a minimum. Don't be attached to them. That's why I like the ideal of whatever is served, I eat, right? So that you don't worry about your likes and dislikes, right? Not the Vivekananda says, not don't even ask yourself the question at dinner, was it good food? Don't even think about whether it was well preserved, well cooked or not. Especially for the monk, it's like you take what comes. That's your duty, right? To find contentment in the moment. People can still be hungry after eating large quantities of wrong foods. In fact, you can suffer from malnutrition even though you consistently overeat your wrong foods. You can begin a healthy diet by having only good, wholesome foods available. Right? So be careful what you buy at the grocery store. It's very timely for me. I was at Trader Joe's last night and I kept walking by those maple leaf cookies. Those those things are so good. And so I banned myself from having any of those cookies in the house because I'm a cookie monster. And I controlled it pretty good, but I would still end up eating two to four cookies every day, right? And when you put that in conjunction with everything else, it's not necessary. And so I battled it last night. I almost gave in. I ended up buying a little carton of sunflower seeds as a compromise because my mind was being a child, I want some cookies. I was like, shush, you can have some sunflower seeds. But so watch our lives. I like how she's going through here, how clear she's being. You can begin a healthy diet by having only good, wholesome foods available. Eat slowly and chew your food well, as I do. Then make food a very incidental part of your life by filling your life so full of meaningful things that you'll hardly have time to think about food. Well, there's an idea, filling your life with meaningful things, right? What would meaningful things be? Studying, prayer,
Gardening, like gardening,
gardening. That's a great one. Yeah.
volunteering somewhere,
Volunteering. Yes. Exercising,
exercising.
having a good study
Good.
program for yourself. Always be reading a book or,
That's right.
studying something, cleaning your house, right? One of the things that I'm trying to do is when I see something that needs to be done, just do it. Don't think to yourself, "Oh, I got to get take that care of that. Keep walking." Right? No, stop. Do it right now. Right? And so I don't have any clothes laying around my room. When my jacket goes off, it goes in the closet. When my shoes go off, they go under the chair. Like that. These little disciplines, because everything in our life is in the moment, right? So bring your eyes down to the moment, and it's very simple. That way things don't get overwhelming. They don't get huge. Just keep it in the moment. That's what Brother Lawrence taught us as well, right? And Sri Nisargadatta and Eckhart Tolle, they all are saying the same thing. Your life happens here and now. This is where your renunciation is. This is where your discernment is. This is where your earnestness is. This is where your commitment is. And so be present with it. In my eating and sleeping habits, I have the closest contact with nature that is possible for me. Each day, I get as much fresh air and sunshine and contact with nature as I can. I think that's a very wise thing to do. I notice that those days when I get out and do some nice gardening, there's something that naturally centers about having your hands in the dirt. I hate to be particular like that about things, but that's something that I've consistently experienced. At those times when I actually get out and start taking care of the plants, doing some watering, that there's something very grounding, very centering, very stabilizing in doing that. So it's nice here to get some fresh air every day, get outside as much as you can, and do things that center you, do things that put you in touch with your nature. And you come from the ground, you come from this earth, this body, right? This body is born of the earth. And so working with the earth is naturally going to have a very comforting effect on us. Each day I go out in the fresh air and sunshine and contact with nature as much as I can. I want to do much of my living out of doors and be part of the landscape. Rest and exercise are important. I am not one who consistently goes without sleep. When possible, I go to bed at dusk and I get 8 hours of sleep. I take my exercise by walking and swinging my arms, which makes it a complete form of exercise. You'd think purification of the body might be the first area in which people would be willing to work, but from practical experience, I've discovered it's often the last, because it might mean getting rid of some of our bad habits. And there is nothing that we cling to more tenaciously, right? That that was the disappointing thing to me. I realized that spiritual life is not difficult at all. Breaking my bad habits around spiritual life is difficult indeed, right? Because it's our attachments. And breaking those attachments aren't difficult at all if you discern, right? If you work that muscle of oneness inside, you don't listen to the arguments of the thoughts you've attached to. You don't, if you've attached to them, they come up with their own voices and talk you out of your discipline. And so you have to as Jesus says, you let your yes be yes and your no be no. Stop living in the gray. Hold your line, hold your space, and be responsible for it. There is a second purification, purification of thought. This is the biggie. If you realize how powerful your thoughts are, you would never think a negative thought. They can be a powerful influence for good when they're on the positive side, and they can make you physically ill when they're on the negative side. I don't eat junk foods, and I don't think junk thoughts. Let me tell you, junk thoughts can destroy you even more quickly than junk food. Junk thoughts are something to be wary of, right? And a lot of these junk thoughts are triggered by things that we offer into the shrine of the body, right? When we sit there and just, you know, for me, I'll just use the one that I'm dealing with now, flipping through YouTube shorts. You get exposed to a lot of stuff in there that you're not taking control of when you just flip and let everything enter in, right? And so you start getting angry, you start getting frustrated, you become aware of things that you don't need to be aware of. Your attention gets pulled to things that you can't do anything about. And we lose the moment when we do that, right? We lose the moment when we start letting the mind be carried away by things we can't do anything about, that we can't have an effect on. When we start losing that sense of calm and contented love that is our nature, and start getting pulled into the more rajasic moods or the more tamasic moods, those things that take us down and the things that make us frenetic and active for no reason, restless, right? But look at this. I go to bed at dusk. Wow. I actually did that on Friday when I got home from the airport. Oh my God, I was tired. I'd been because I got up at the equivalent of 1 o'clock in the morning in Atlanta and then traveled, all day and then got here around 6:30 that night. And I just walked into the house. I was delirious into the monastery. I just put some things in the fridge that had to go in the fridge, and I just walked in my room and I was in bed before 7 and I was out. That was, I lay there. I didn't even let myself look at the clock because I was like, you're not allowed to be in bed at 7. And I was like, well, I am tonight. So how she just, I like how she's being responsible and taking care of herself. And I think there's probably lots of room for us to really take a look at that. Um, so the second purification, this purification of thought. They're a powerful influence for good when they're on the positive side, and they can make you physically ill when they're on the negative side. Junk thoughts, right? Let me tell you a story of a man adversely affected by negative thoughts. He was 65 years old when I knew him, and he was manifesting symptoms of what was called a chronic physical illness. When I talked to him, I realized there was some bitterness in his life. However, I couldn't put my finger on it right away because I saw he was getting along well with his wife, his grown children, and the folks in his community as well. But the bitterness was there just the same. I found that he was harboring bitterness against his father, who had been dead for many years since, because his father had educated his brother and not him. He was very intellectual, so I talked to him at length. When he, the eldest son, was to be educated, his father had absolutely not enough money to do it. In fact, the family was very poor at that time. There were several sisters after him, and I think 3 of them hadn't been educated either. His brother was the youngest, and by that time his father had more money and was able to educate the brother. He didn't begrudge his brother the education. He just thought he should have gotten it too. When he saw intellectually that his father had done the best he could with both of his sons, then he was able to release the bitterness that he had been harboring. That so-called chronic illness began to fade away, and soon the condition was much improved. And then it was gone. If you're harboring the slightest bitterness toward anyone, or any unkind thoughts of any sort whatsoever, you must get rid of them quickly. They are not hurting anyone but you. It is not enough just to do right things and say right things. You must also think right things before your life can come into harmony. All right, so see, this is the kind of attention for that harmonious living. It's important just to let these things in, you know. When we hear them, don't because we've all heard these things before. We know all of these things, but to hear them in the moment and have it affect your moment, go through, become aware, start looking around. I'm looking inside. Is there bitterness there? Is there pain in the heart? And have you done everything that is in your power to do it, to fix it, or to move it, right? That's the important thing, though, to know. And as much as it has to do with you, live at peace. You can't always affect how others act or what others are in your life. And that's the trick, is how to dance, how to fix that. That's why Ramakrishna teaches us about the tiger god. There's some things in your life that aren't going to come into harmony. They aren't going to fix. The person is just not going to let go of their own stuff. And so at those times, you have to be willing to step back and say, okay, no hard feelings, no judgments, but I'm going to have to put some distance in here, right? I can't have that effect in my life. And so you're still very kind to the person. You're still, you know, pleasant and polite, but you just don't encourage more contact, more time like that. During the preparation period, I wasn't fully identifying with the real me. I was just learning. I was very forgiving toward others. That was no problem. But I was very unforgiving toward myself. If I did something that wasn't the highest, I would say to myself, "You ought to know better." And then one day, as I was combing my hair at the mirror, I looked at myself and said, "You vain thing. Why do you think you know better when you forgive everyone else for not knowing better? You are not any better than they are. You must learn to forgive yourself as easily as you forgive others." All right? As a matter of fact, that's where it begins. Everything begins with ourself. That's one of the experiments you can do is pick up any one little practice you want and see how it changes the flow of your life, right? That one thing when I was practicing in Hollywood when I lived there, going out and taking $5 on my walk with me and praying to Mother to find someone who needed that or who that would be helpful to, right? Because I was trying to take my mind off myself and trying to think of others and trying to become aware of others. So doing that whole thing about seeing God in people's eyes before you address them, or before you say hi to them, so that you actually say hi to Thakur instead of to them in their personality. You do little things like that, and you do it purposely and consistently, and for a week or two, you change your behavior directly, and then you see the change. You see that it's very true what Gandhi said: be the change that you want to see in the world, right? You'll actually see the world change if you change your own focus, if you make your own efforts, because all of us create our own world. We're not all in the same world, right? We share a world, but each one of us within that sharing creates our own. And that's kind of what causes our troubles. Because if our world serves us more than it serves others, there's going to be friction, right? You must learn to forgive yourself as easily as you forgive others, and then take a further step and use that energy that you used in condemning yourself for improving yourself. After that, I really started to get somewhere because there's only one person you can change, and that's yourself. After you have changed yourself, you might be able to inspire others to look for change. It took the living quite a while to catch up with the believing, but it finally did. And when it did, a progress began which never ended. As I lived up to the highest light I had, higher and higher light came to me. All right, this is important. We begin paying attention in the moment and making those changes as the moment comes. More and more light comes in. The mind gets quieter and quieter, and understanding gets deeper and deeper, and inspiration gets deeper and deeper, right? It's such a simple and humble thing. And the way she produces it, you can see how serious she was about it. Just as I read the words, I can hear the clip in them. Just there's no extra flowery stuff around them. You can just see. She says, when I saw them, I did them each moment at a time. Boom, 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 right? Not working in big stuff out there, right here, right now. Boom, boom. This is not part of my ideal. This is not helpful to me. This is not taking me in the direction that I want to go. Being that clear, right? And that constant in your discernment, that the moment of your practice continues. It doesn't break. It's continuous all the time. The third purification is the purification of desire. What are the things that you desire? Do you desire superficial things like pleasures, new items of wearing apparel, or new household furnishings or cars, or I would have to add in computers. Since you are here to get yourself in harmony with the laws that govern human conduct, and with your part in the scheme of things, your desires should be focused in this direction. It is very important to get your desires centered so that you will desire only to do God's will for you. You can come to the point of oneness of desire just to know and do your part in the life pattern. What you think about, is there anything else as really important to desire? Right? When you think about it, is there anything else as really important to desire? Right? Except just knowing. My friend, one of the people here at the temple, always tells me, live within the knowledge. Right? Live within the knowledge. What is the knowledge? That I'm divine, that my nature is love, wisdom, and being. And constantly bring yourself back to that. Just that simple fact. Love, wisdom, and being. This moment, this decision, what I'm doing, does it express love? Does it express wisdom? Right? Is it keeping me present? Is it keeping my mind on the ground floor? Right? And by the ground floor, I mean when you start thinking about a concept and you get into a mood and it starts to affect an emotion, then you get into these states of mind which are not in the moment. They've carried you somewhere, and we get caught in those patterns of thinking. Try to stay on the ground floor. Just try to stay absolutely present, and don't be standing on a platform of other thoughts and be thinking from that platform of other thoughts, right? Stay down at Om. Stay down at the quiet, at the silent, and always work from that place, from the silent space, from the contentment. Don't work from moods. Don't work from states of mind. Don't work from flurry, you know, agitated aspects of self. Always bring yourself back to the calm, to the moment, to the quiet, and then make your decisions, discern your moment, do what's in front of you, do it locally with a pleasant, fond regard for the moment, and go forward. There is one more purification, and that is the purification of motive. What is your motive for whatever you may be doing, right? This is a very difficult one. I had a really challenging thing happen down at in Atlanta. I was down there. I was getting every day at 4:30. We had this tea with the Swami, and I was the Swami. And so everybody would come by for tea with the Swami in the afternoons, and we'd sit there, and there were usually, somewhere between 5 and 15 people there. And one day, one of the men at the center down there is a foster parent, and so he brought his foster child, and he was probably about 12 years old, I think, and I talked to him, and I liked him immediately because he had very clear eyes, and he was very self-possessed and very confident. And at some point, I had, this little screen going in front of me like I do right now. And, I was just being, just, just being whatever I am, in that moment. And he came up to me, he says, "You look like you're showing off." And, from the mouth of babes, you can't throw that out lightly. You have to sit there and think, wow, hmm, right? And so that's been my big thing in this last week. It's like name and fame. That's a dangerous one, if you put yourself out there. And so I've been watching. What's your motive? How much how much showboating is there in my life, right? And so trying to become aware of that, trying to see that, because none of us are exempt from delusion. We have to be very careful, and I feel like I like to tell you guys about it because I think it's helpful for me to to get it out there and I always offer myself, if you've got something to say that I need to hear, because after he said that to me, because it really, I wasn't thrown off by it, but I really heard it. I was like, that was a message from mother, from the mouth of babes. When something comes to you like that, completely unasked, it's good to hear it. And so I went into the kitchen and Jyoti was in there, and I just took her aside and I said, Jyoti, this just happened. I said, can you just tell me squarely, is there something about myself that I need to be aware of, that I need to see that I'm not seeing? And of course, she said no. I was like, oh, good. I am perfect. Perfect. Excellent. Now we can move on. Right. But have good friends around. That's what Sangha is for. Our Sangha, our relationships with each other, especially here, because you guys really have become my Sangha. Here it's very still. And so I see you guys as my Sangha. And in Sangha, we should be intimate enough with each other that we can live honestly with each other, right? So that we don't have to sugarcoat everything and make sure that we're only saying niceties. We should be able, in perfect comfort, to walk up to each other and put a hand on a shoulder and say, "You seem like you're showing off." Right? We should be able to say it, just to put it up there, no judgment, because and what will take the judgment away? To say it because you love someone, right? To say it because you love someone. That's how Vivekananda got away. Anybody else that said the things to America that he said when he was here, they would have been strung up, you know. They would have been strung up. But you can always know that he's telling you stuff because he's looking at your higher ideal. And his things don't offend you because they're always packaged in a way that are inspiring, in a way that call you higher. And so when we talk to each other, if you're going to correct somebody, right? Normally we just want to know whether we're right or not. And if we're right, then we'll go tell them. But this is more important what she's saying. What's your motive for telling them? Is it because you love them and you want them to do better? Because you see them doing better? Or are you doing it because you're right? Are you going to do it because it's going to put you in a place of power and take them down a notch? Right? And these are the subtle ways that we have to watch the way our samskaras have set up our mind, right? This if we're egotistical, almost everything we do and say in some ways is going to be to build up the ego. So we have to be particularly careful on this one. So she's saying this is the final purification. This is the most subtle one. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I saying what I'm saying? There is one more purification, and that's the purification of motive. What is your motive for whatever you may be doing? If it is pure, if it is pure greed or self-seeking or the wish for self-glorification, I would say don't do that thing, right? That's exactly it. Don't do it. Don't do it at all, right? Even if you realize, oh, I'm doing this for selfish means, okay, well, now that I know it, I can say it anyway. I would say that actually don't say it for a while, right? Just to make sure, kind of just to keep that part of your mind unexercised and say, if there's any pure motive in it for the time, for right now, for the beginning, I'm just not going to say it at all, you know? And then maybe later, if I can determine that I really am beginning to care or to love, then give your permission to say these things to people. Don't do anything you would do with such a motive. But that isn't easy because we tend to do things with very mixed motives. I never found a person who had purely bad motives. There may be such a person, but I've never encountered one. That's a very important thing. We are all a mixed bag, and we have to let each other be a mixed bag, right? It's ourself that we're looking at. It's ourself that we're purifying. We are the only person we can change. And that is really important, especially as a rule of Sangha. You are your responsibility, right? And you are the one that can be changed. And so you live to grow, right? You live to grow. You don't hold on to anything, and you don't demand respect. You don't demand place. You're always encouraging, always hoping, always trusting, always giving in that way, in our ideal. God, it's, I talk like this. I just wish I was a better person. Like, oh my God. How long? I mean, how many years have we all been working on this stuff and still we can just sit here and just a little bit of scratching. It's like, oh my God. Oh, for the grace of God, right? That's important to remember right there. We're steady in our lives because of God's love for us, not because of our performance or lack of performance. We are courageous and we're full of zeal and we're full of joy because of the love of the beloved, because of that image of God that was given to us when we came to know ourselves or to be ourselves and to really hold on to that, right? That's God's that's most important to constantly have grace for the reason that we love. We accept ourselves because the mother does. She hasn't smudged any of us out at this point, right? So we don't need to do it. I do encounter people who constantly have mixed motives, good and bad motives all mixed together. For instance, I met a man in the business world and he admitted that his motives were not the highest, and yet mixed into them were good motives, providing for his family, doing some good for his community. Mixed motives. I talk to groups studying the most advanced spiritual teachings, and sometimes these people wonder why nothing is happening in their lives. Their motive is the attainment of inner peace for themselves, which, of course, is a selfish motive. You will not find it with this motive. The motive, if you are to find inner peace, must be an outgoing motive. Service, of course. Service. Giving, not getting. Your motive must be good if your work is to have a good effect. The secret of life is being of service. That's what Vivekananda said, what Ramakrishna says. Our lives start off me and mine, right? Me and mine. Oof. We measure everything according to that. But he says, where do we want to get to? Ultimately, letting go of that, and it's thee and thine, right? And so we're always looking for service because I remember I told Swami that when I first joined the order. I was doing all of my practices and doing all my readings and doing my exercise, and it was all me, 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 me in the monastery. And it's really easy to be all about you when you're alone in a monastery, right? But it has to become thee and thine, right? We have to be thinking about others and not thinking about ourselves. And so, oh Lord, so we have to, whew, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed, to be frank with you. But yes, this, yeah, I say that and I see it's because I'm not staying in the moment here. I'm just thinking about this big world of things that have to change and all these things that I've said in lectures that I need to work on and that I'm going to start doing, right? And I look back and I'm like, oh, I didn't do that one. Oh God, I didn't do that one. Oh God, I didn't do that one. Right? I went through my emails yesterday and I'd made this big commitment. I've made this commitment many times. I'm going to answer that. I'm going to answer my emails as soon as I can. Well, not as soon as I can. I'm supposed to answer them right away when I read them. And same thing with text messages and whatnot. And I'm just not keeping up, just not doing it. And it's, it's the real temptation is just not to look at that stuff, to be like, whatever, 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 and flatter, try and swat it away like a gnat. But the real power is to sit in grace and to look up them and say, yes, that's right. Let's get back on the horse here, right? One thing at a time. Just go forward. Don't be defeated by these things. So, the secret of life is being of service. I knew a man who was a good architect. It was obviously his right work, but he was doing it with the wrong motive. His motive was to make a lot of money and to keep ahead of the Joneses. He worked himself into an illness, and it was shortly after that that I met him. I got him to do little things for service. I talked to him about the joy of service, and I knew that after he had experienced this, he could never go back into really self-centered living. Right? And that's another great point right there. Once you get going on a life of service, once you get going on challenging yourself and working on these things, you can't go back, right? Because the byproduct of service is always going to be bliss, because service is born of your nature, love and wisdom, right? It's who you are. And so any of this stuff that we're talking about, once you start sincerely moving in that direction, you can't go back. Sometimes the mind wants to go back, you know. I remember there was a time when I rem this was quite a few years ago, but when I was a teenager, I used to sleep into like 10 or 11, on Saturday mornings, just a real good for nothing on Saturdays. And it wasn't hard to do at all. And there was a time a few years ago where I had that thought came to me and I thought, oh, tomorrow I'm going to give myself permission just to stay in bed. I couldn't stay in bed past 7. I simply couldn't do it. I woke up because I would wake up at my normal time, which is a bit earlier than that. And I just laid there. I couldn't go back to sleep. And, I'd rolled over and played a solitaire game once or twice, you know, and I just realized, wow, that belongs to another time. I've grown. I can't, I, I couldn't even do that if I wanted to. Oops. There we go. Just a moment. There it is. So, know that you will change, you'll grow, you'll go forward. You don't need to plan it out. That's our big mistake, right? We try to plan out our changes. We try to plan out our service, but it all comes down to this moment. Don't worry about it beyond this moment. If you can keep your mind on it in this moment, it will stay there as long as you keep it in this moment, right? And so that's how we go forward. So don't plan huge changes. That's how they get overwhelming. That's why I'm seeing in my own mind, oh, all these things. And I go and grab all these things that I've wanted to change. And I look at them all at once. And what happens? You get weak knees. You're like, oh my God. And then the negatives start. Oh, I'm such a failure. I'm such a hypocrite. You know, I'm such an idiot. All those negative things come in. No place for those. No need for those, right? Be in the moment and be free. But keep the rudder firmly in Satchitananda. Keep your rudder firmly established in the direction of love and wisdom and just go. And like Brother Lawrence, if you make a mistake, acknowledge it, stop doing it, keep going. If there's an omission, acknowledge it, start doing it, and go forward. That's it. Always in the moment. Just like that. All right. We're going to stop there for this week. I wonder if I can do that. All right. Let's stop there.